December 19, 1944, Eisenhower faced his worst nightmare, a German counteroffensive tearing through Allied lines, while his boldest commander prepared an operation that could either save thousands or collapse into strategic disaster. American forces encircled, winter closing in, time running out. Every hour delayed meant more casualties at Bastogne. What Patton discovered during the pivot north changed everything. The argument at Verdun revealed a secret tension. One decision nearly cost them the entire operation. What happened next would determine whether Patton's gamble saved the Allied advance or ended his career forever. The nightmare begins. December 16, 1944. The Allies believed victory in Europe was just months away. Then, without warning, German forces launched a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest. Thousands of enemy soldiers poured through a weak point in Allied defenses. American troops were caught completely off guard. Within hours, the German offensive created what would become known as the Bulge, a dangerous bulge in the Allied front lines. The situation grew worse by the minute. The elite 101st Airborne Division found themselves trapped in the small Belgian town of Bastogne, surrounded, cut off from supplies. Winter storms made air support impossible. These soldiers faced elimination unless help arrived fast. But reinforcements were hundreds of miles away, fighting their own battles. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of all Allied forces, faced an impossible choice. He needed someone bold enough to attempt the unthinkable, but there was only one man crazy enough to try it, and Eisenhower wasn't sure he could control him. The emergency meeting. 3 days after the German attack, Eisenhower called an emergency meeting in Verdun, France, December 19, 1944. The room was cold, the mood was darker. Every senior Allied commander gathered around a map showing the disaster unfolding. Eisenhower knew the soldiers at Bastogne had maybe a week before they ran out of ammunition and food. He turned to his commanders and asked who could launch a counterattack. Most generals said it would take weeks to reorganize their forces. Then Patton spoke up. He claimed he could attack in just 2 days. The room went silent. Other commanders thought it was impossible. Some believed Patton was being reckless, maybe even dangerous. That's when the argument started, a heated exchange that revealed a deep tension between leadership styles. Eisenhower and Patton were old friends, but their relationship was complicated. Eisenhower valued Patton's aggressive fighting style, but he also remembered the scandals that had nearly ended Patton's career. What Patton said next shocked everyone in that room and forced Eisenhower to make a decision that could cost him everything. The impossible task. Patton promised to turn his entire Third Army 90 degrees and drive north toward Bastogne. No army in history had attempted such a massive maneuver in the middle of winter. Over 130,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks and trucks, all moving through snow and ice. The logistics were a nightmare. Roads were frozen, maps were outdated. But Eisenhower made his choice. He gave Patton the order to move. Then came the decision that nearly destroyed everything. Eisenhower told Patton he was taking away one of his best divisions, the 10th Armored, and giving it to another commander. Patton was furious. He protested loudly, arguing he needed every soldier for the mission ahead. For a moment, it seemed Patton might refuse the mission entirely. The tension in the room was unbearable. Eisenhower stood firm. The decision was made. Patton left the meeting angry but determined to prove everyone wrong. What happened over the next 4 days would become legendary, but as Patton's army began moving north, they discovered something that changed the entire operation.
The pivot north. Patton had been attacking east toward Germany's industrial heartland. Now he had to abandon that mission and pivot his entire army north toward Bastogne. His staff worked around the clock, rewriting plans, redirecting supply columns, rerouting thousands of vehicles through unfamiliar territory. As the Third Army began its massive turn, Patton discovered the true scale of the German offensive. Intelligence reports revealed the enemy had committed far more forces than anyone realized. The Germans weren't just creating a bulge, they were trying to split the Allied armies completely in half. If they succeeded, they could reach the coast and cut off hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers from their supply lines. This discovery changed everything about Patton's mission. He wasn't just rescuing one town anymore. He was preventing a catastrophic defeat that could prolong the war by months, maybe years. The weather worsened. Snowstorms buried roads. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Soldiers struggled to move equipment through ice and mud. Every delay meant more American troops trapped at Bastogne would face elimination. Then, just as Patton's lead units approached the German lines, something unexpected happened. Breaking through. December 22, 1944. Patton's Third Army reached the German defensive positions surrounding Bastogne. Enemy forces had dug in, creating strong defensive lines to block any rescue attempt. Patton's tanks faced heavy resistance. Every mile forward came at a terrible cost. German artillery rained down on American columns. Roadside ambushes struck supply trucks moving through narrow forest roads. But Patton drove his commanders relentlessly. No stopping, no retreat, only forward movement mattered. His aggressive tactics pushed exhausted soldiers beyond their limits. Some units fought for 72 hours straight without rest. Back at headquarters, Eisenhower waited anxiously for news from the front. He knew if Patton failed, the men at Bastogne would be lost, and the political consequences would be devastating. Allies would question American leadership and strategy. On December 26th, after 4 days of brutal fighting, Patton's lead tanks broke through the German encirclement. The first relief column reached the defenders of Bastogne. The encirclement was broken. The soldiers were saved. News spread quickly through Allied command, but the personal cost of this victory would haunt both Eisenhower and Patton.
The aftermath. Patton's relief of Bastogne became one of the most celebrated military achievements of the entire war. His ability to move an entire army in winter conditions amazed military historians for decades to come. The operation proved that aggressive, bold leadership could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Eisenhower's gamble on Patton paid off, but it came with heavy losses. Thousands of American soldiers didn't make it home from the Battle of the Bulge. Families received devastating news throughout January. The Battle of the Bulge would continue for weeks, becoming one of the costliest battles America fought in Europe. Eisenhower and Patton's relationship remained complicated throughout the rest of the war. Mutual respect mixed with constant friction over strategy and tactics. Patton wanted to keep pushing east into Germany aggressively. Eisenhower had to manage complex politics with British and Soviet allies who had their own concerns. Their friendship survived the war, but both men carried scars from the decisions made that December. The week that Eisenhower feared Patton's aggressive push became the week that saved the Allied advance in Europe. Sometimes the most dangerous gambles are the only path to victory. The story of Eisenhower and Patton during those critical December days reminds us that leadership sometimes means trusting dangerous gambles. Their partnership, built on friendship, tested by war, and strained by conflicting personalities, ultimately saved thousands of lives. History would remember this as Patton's finest hour and Eisenhower's greatest test of command. The relief of Bastogne proved that bold action, even when risky, can change the course of history forever.